some studies have found that you have this dark triad of interrelated personality disorders: narcissism, which is entitlement and grandiosity; Machiavellianism, which is that you're power hungry and so forth; and psychopathology, which is that you just have no empathy for other people and you exploit them and all this sort of simplifying it. But that's roughly it.
Sure.
Okay. Now, what some studies have found is that the left, again, I emphasize in Western samples, are high in narcissism, which makes sense because if you the narcissism often develops because you have fundamental sort of insecurities, and so then you create this narcissistic false self which tells you that you can imagine that you're morally superior to other people, you're better than them. And so how do you get narcissistic supply? Well, it's via being more left-wing than the last man in left-wing society, and people are complimenting you and telling you you're great. Machiavellianism, which is to do with getting power. How do you get power most easily in a left-wing society? It's by being more left-wing than the last man in a careful kind of way, game playing kind of way. Now, if you're high in psychopathology, this seems to be associated with being extreme right wing, alt right sort of thing. And I think that makes sense because people that are psychopaths they are adapted to an ecology of risk. And they like upsetting people. They enjoy upsetting people. How do you upset people? You're far right. They like risk and instability and danger. How do you get that? You're far right. And you have this sense of excitement and all this, right? And that's what they thrive off. So that is associated with being far right, not far left. And so I think that those people as well, and that makes sense in terms of Nazism, because it seems to me that if you look at the individual analyses of a lot of the Nazi leaders, these people were messed up. Okay, and these people were probably high in mutational load, but in such a way that they were psychopaths. And then, of course, once they got power, then that's going to attract the typical narcissistic types who would be communist apparatchiks in a communist society, but it's a Nazi society, so they're Nazi apparatchiks.
I see. So it feels to me then, and I'm only trying to sort of play devil's advocate here, that it's both sides. Anyone who goes too far extreme on one side.
Yeah, sure. But the point is that what we were broadly selecting towards was conservatism under harsh conditions.
Sort of a centrist conservatism.
I would expect conservatism. Yeah. I would expect the bulk of the deviation, therefore, to be in the direction of leftism, and that is what you find. That the correlation is not. It is leftism, and in particular, that is mainly associated with high mutational load. There would be deviation in the other direction, but it would just be less pronounced and less sort of noticeable. But certainly there is, and I did a video about this recently, which upset a lot of people, where I talked about purity signaling.
Yeah, and
I said, well, it's just clearly the case that you get these online keyboard warriors who are everything, in my own stuff, everything that they say. It's, why didn't you mention the Jew? Oh, the Jew, everything, like everything. I once interviewed on my channel a guy called David Duke. He was a very intelligent guy, except in so much as
the head of the KKK.
I did, or former head of the KKK. And I got to a point where I said to him, is there any question I could ask you that you wouldn't steer back to the Jews? And then he thought about it, and he thought, no, not really, no. So,
did you say David Duke was a pleasant guy, a good guy?
He came across as perfectly pleasant to talk to.
But yeah, well, that's a different thing, isn't it? I mean, psychopaths.
I can't tell you any more detail than that. But
what do you mean you can't?
Well, I don't know the guy. No. I don't know him. I've just spoken to him online for an hour and a half.
I think. I mean, look, you and I are the same in that I think we don't want to moralize and assume that we're morally better than another person. So I try as hard as I can in my life not to do that, right. and because it's just annoying and it's a boring thing to do, and we're often wrong. But this is a guy that headed up people walking around with white hats that were going and lynching black men.
I'm not aware that he was in charge when they were doing that, but he certainly headed an organisation that
was known for doing that.
Yes. So, but as I say, honestly, I've read his autobiography, but it was a long time ago. It may well be the case that he has markers of subclinical psychopathology. Indeed, the research by Felix Post, he did a study on, and it was called Creativity and Psychopathology, a study of 291 great men, and he found that among those that are highly accomplished, there are very high levels of psychopathology and markers of psychopathology, and that's what you would expect, because if you people find this difficult to comprehend. Some people do, I don't know, but if you put yourself in a position of prominence then you've got to be able to accept people slagging you off. You've got to be able to accept people hating you. You've got to be able to accept all kinds of unpleasant stuff.
What does that suggest about you and me? In
Well,
the
you know,
jobs we do.
we should be. I mean, I'm going to this conference tomorrow on narcissism,
Yes.
and so the guy that runs it is
it Richard Grannon, is
Richard
it?
Grannon, yeah.
He's been on the show. He's
Has
a
he?
good friend of mine.
He's a good friend of mine as well.
He's an even better friend of mine.
He's my 12th cousin.
He's my
Lover.
gay lover. Yeah.
Yeah,
Shout out to Richard Grannon there. If people don't know,
Shout out to Grannon there. He's a gentle lover to this man.
yes, he is. He
gentle.
He is.
Gentle.
He whispers
Gentle.
sweet nothings in my ear. But he's anyone, if you haven't watched already, go back to the episode.
He's
I've done
not
with
gentle
him.
when he gets started, but once he gets into
Oh
it and
my
his
gosh.
dominance is accepted, then
I hope you enjoy seeing Richard.
then he's I will, not as much as you did, obviously.
Oh God.
But he obviously, you know, he's helping people with narcissistic recovery. This is the sort of thing that he does, you see. But in many ways, I one suspects he is the wounded healer. As this this Henry Nouwen, this concept, the wounded healer, this idea that if you've been through trauma yourself and you can help others through it, and that's perhaps he's been through narcissistic abuse himself. But I'm afraid like attracts like. And that was, I think, one of the really fascinating. There's a lot of research on that, genetic similarity theory and all that. People who are narcissistic
Do you
tend
think
to.
Richard Grannon might be a narcissist?
Oh, for sure. Well, no, I didn't.
I asked him that. I asked him that.
Full on narcissist, but certainly he has narcissistic trait narcissism.
He
for
admits
sure.
that openly.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised, and I think that both of us almost certainly have narcissistic traits.
You and him.
And you,
Oh, God.
and that's why you get yourself into positions where people are watching and people are recognizing you and all this, and people are admiring your work, and there is a degree to which that's motivational. People enjoy that. You like that. One likes that. So I think that's certainly true. I think that anyone that is going to be, if you can, once you get intelligence a factor in attaining achievement or socioeconomic status, then you look into the other factors. Now, if it's with not the kind of person that becomes famous, but the kind of person that becomes just sort of eminent, then that's associated with general factor of personality. That is to say, agreeableness, conscientiousness, low neuroticism, being a pro-social person.
Low eroticism.
Neuroticism.
Oh, sorry.
But once you get to people who have who become quite prominent, famous even, then they're original. Those kinds of people, creatives.
Yeah.
Then you've got to think about the fact that if you come up with a new idea, if we think about genius, specifically genius, what's going to predict doing that? Well, the evidence is that it's moderately low agreeableness, low conscientiousness, high neuroticism. So it's the opposite. It's antisocial traits. Why? Well, because if you are low in agreeableness, let's say you have autistic traits, you don't understand that your new ideas are going to offend against vested interests. You're just focused on the truth and on systematizing and on coming up with new ways of doing things and making connections and so forth. You just don't understand that it's going to offend people. If you're subclinically psychopathic, then you won't care that it will offend people. In fact, you might quite enjoy tickling them up.
I think, okay, so here's a question then, because I understand about a lot of this being genetically related, and it's a really interesting theory, and I'm starting to see that. However, a lot of people, of course, change and move from left to right in their lives. A lot of people are changed by environmental circumstances. I probably wouldn't be doing this if, when I started, I was making more documentaries about.
No, for sure. They're only, but that's you can. If I finish what I was saying about genius, then agreeable. So that's agreeableness. Then conscientiousness. That's rule following and impulse control. Now you may notice that if you've ever taken, I don't know, cannabis or something, that you have moments of perception. You see these patterns that you wouldn't otherwise see, perhaps. Okay, well, that's because your conscientiousness is reduced by the cannabis, and so it's the same way that for some people, certain things are just unthinkable. But if you're low in impulse control, low in rule following, then you can think outside the box, come up with original ideas. And then neuroticism seems to be relevant because if you're neurotic, you're constantly worrying and therefore constantly thinking. One. Secondly, you're not happy with the world, and this makes you want to make sense of it, to in a way take control of it. And then finally, extroversion, or at least a trait of extroversion, which is sensation seeking. It gives people a high to solve their problem and come up with something original. They really feel something.
I relate to that.
So do I. And so these things kind of come together. And then if that's if that comes together with outlier high intelligence, then you have the genius type. Now, there's a degree to which other creatives in the arts or whatever are going to be a bit like that. They're going to be relatively like that within certain checks and balances. And so obviously narcissism it's what's it associated with. It's basically extroversion and low agreeableness and aspects of low neuroticism. That's the essence of the narcissistic personality.
Okay.
And so you can see that narcissists are going to get, with once you control for intelligence, are going to do quite well. And I would expect, because narcissists sexually select for each other, I mean, it's genetic, they literally are going to find each other attractive, then of course narcissists are themselves going to find themselves subject to narcissistic abuse. They're going to be very interested in narcissism. And so I'm going to start my speech when I go to this conference by saying, oh, it's wonderful to be with all these lovely narcissists.
I like that.
So I think there's a great deal of truth in that.
My fiance might be offended. And if she is a narcissist, she'll be very offended, I suppose.
Well, if she's a vulnerable narcissist, particularly, they get very offended, the vulnerable women ones.
I'll make sure to remind her of that. So for a lot of this to work, we have to go along with the idea that politics, to an extent, is inherited. Is there a lot of evidence to suggest? Because I'd always thought, oh, people, Rage Against the Machine, my parents are right wing, I'm going to be a big lefty, and so on.
Yes, there is. The evidence is that from twin studies of identical twins and twin adoption studies, is it's something in the region of 0.6.
What does that mean?
So it's about 6% genetic for an environment. So
it's not huge.
That's a simplification, but that's roughly what it means.
It's significant, but not huge, is it?
No, it's pretty big. By psychology standards, it's big.
Okay.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you vote for the same political party. But it's whether you're broadly conservative or broadly liberal left wing. The moral foundations themselves, which I mentioned earlier, those 5 are about 50% 0.5 heritable, something like that. So you're seeing how this works. So
people are not that way, don't they? They start as students and they rage against their parents, and then
they go through. That's interesting as well, because one of the predictors of political viewpoint is your the big 5 personality traits, Ocean. So we have these big 5 personality traits, and they're about 50% heritable. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And those that are high in conscientiousness, high in agreeableness, and low in neuroticism tend towards voting conservative, tend to be conservative politically. And those that are the opposite of that, i.e. people that are mentally unstable and selfish, tend to be left-wing. But there's going to be all kinds of variations in that. One of them is age. So these traits agreeableness goes up with age, extroversion goes down with age, conscientiousness goes up with age, neuroticism goes down with age. So basically this means that we become more conservative as we age. But there's this blip in late adolescence, i.e. when you go to university, that kind of time, where it reverses. So you're getting more intelligent still, because that goes up with age till about middle age. But then you become essentially more antisocial and more mentally unstable. And it's been suggested that helps you to break the bond with the parents, which you'd have to do at that age, to strive out into the world on your own, where you need to be confident and things like that. And perhaps also with females to make them more kind of concerned about the kind of man they're going to get, that sort of thing. And also with men, perhaps because that's the kind of age when they're going to be fighting for their tribe and they're going to have to do psychopathic things and kill people. But whatever, there is that. And so you would expect a rebellion to occur at that age. Which makes sense, but then it reverses by the age of about 30, and then your frontal lobes fuse, and then you're it's pretty fixed kind of what you are.